This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hi, thank you so much for being a part of Raising Me. This is where we take, those everyday challenges we face as parents right to the experts for advice, helping us to become better people and ultimately better parents. I'm Adrienne Stein, longtime journalist and a mom of 3, trying to figure it all out too. Today, it seems like such a simple topic on the surface, but it really can get quite complicated. We're talking about allowance. Simple, right? Kids do some chores or something around the house, they get some cash. But what should be chores for cash, and what should they just be doing because they're part of the family? How much should they earn? For how long? When to start? And even those little side purchases, this gets me a lot. Just gum at the checkout line, for instance, or a new small toy. When is it best to say, well, did you bring your money? Rather than, yeah, sure, throw it in the cart. Mary Dyer is back with us. She helped us navigate our money mindset in a previous episode and is just a tremendous resource when it comes to this. She's the Financial Education Program Manager at the Finance Authority of Maine, and of course has navigated these same challenges with her own kids too. It is a conversation I was taking a ton of notes with on the whole time because I didn't want to forget anything. It's just great perspective and insight all around. Mary, thank you so much for coming back and hanging with us. I'm so excited to talk to you about allowance.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. It's a great topic.
It's a great topic. It's tricky though, too, and you wouldn't think so. It's pretty straightforward when you think about it, but then you get into it and there are all kinds of nuances you have to think about. First, let's start with just the basic. Why is getting an allowance important for kids?
I think that most experts would agree that having an agreement with your child around an allowance and using an allowance is a wonderful way to teach early money lessons and early financial skills. So, the best way for kids to learn is to actually be able to interact with money and have money and spend money and maybe even perhaps make mistakes with their spending. And really, the only way to do that when they're super young and can't go out and get a job is to build an allowance into your household. So it's just a wonderful way to teach kids about money and one that we strongly recommend.
At what age, though? This is, something our kids run the gamut, right? 5, 11, 16. At what age should you start having money conversations / hey, let's start thinking about allowance? Do you let the kids lead, or do we as parents, should we take the lead on the allowance conversation?
First of all, I would strongly discourage parents from overcomplicating things or being concerned about what's the perfect age. Am I too late? I think the message to send is it's never too early to start having money conversations and using an allowance, and it's never too late. So I think for all of us as parents, there's just not enough time in the day, and the next thing you know, you blink and they're 5, 10, 15 years old and beyond. And so I think the more complex we make the allowance discussion and decision, and the more we worry about the perfect time and place and plan, we get stuck and then we don't do anything. And so don't worry so much about, the perfect time, when to begin. Never too early, never too late, I think is the thing I would want parents to remember. As far as young children, preschool age, perhaps it's not a full-blown allowance where you're handing over money. Maybe you're using with my kids who are now, 19 and 24, I had a rewards chart where they would earn stickers on a chart for certain chores or behaviors or things that we wanted to work on at home. And once they earned enough stickers, then they would have some sort of predefined reward. So maybe with a younger child, you take that approach, but as they get into kindergarten and elementary school, then you look at, incorporating an actual allowance. But again, if they're in high school or middle school and you haven't even thought about it yet, it's never too late. And so you can begin to incorporate an allowance even if you didn't start when they were in kindergarten. So I think just to emphasize, there's no right or wrong answer here. The key is just to begin to have those conversations and get started, regardless of where you're at in their lifespan.
And consistency too.
Yeah.
That is both important and sometimes challenging. Speaking from experience, we'll get real good with an allowance for, so many months. And then, sort of the wheels fall off and the dishwasher wasn't unloaded. So,
exactly.
Which we can get into that part, but just being consistent is really key. How much? Like, how much money should you be giving to your kids?
So again, no right or wrong answers. There are no right or wrong answers with this topic and with many money topics. So I don't want parents and caregivers to feel like, okay, I haven't quite gotten this right, and so I'm not going to tackle this one, or I'm afraid of making the right choice. So no perfect, answers here, but a general rule of thumb is $1 to $2 a week, depending on the age of the child. So if they're 5 years old, they earn $5 a week, or maybe $10 a week. Again, whatever you feel comfortable. This is your decision as a parent and as a family. But that $1 to $2 a week is kind of a general rule of thumb that a lot of experts recommend. And so that's a good starting point. So, if you have a 10-year-old, maybe it's $10 to $20 a week that they earn. And that's sort of a rule of thumb if you want to use that.
Oh my gosh, my 16-year-old is going to love that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially if you go with the $32 a week, right? Not a bad deal.
Sure.
The other thing you mentioned, that what is key is to stick to it. And that's really important. Coming up with a plan in advance. So for you as a parent, deciding what is the amount, is it going to be a chores-based approach? And are these going to be chores that we would expect them to do anyway? Or are they chores that are sort of above and beyond their contribution as, a member of the household? Part of that money lesson is to give the child an opportunity to have a reliable amount on a reliable day for a reliable set of activities, because that's what happens when we get a job, right? You come to work at this time, you do these things, and then you earn a paycheck. And so having the allowance sort of follow that approach as best you can and then sticking to that is really, really critical. So make a plan for sure.
Can we get a little bit into that idea of what should just be normal? You're part of this family and we all do X.
Sure.
Whether it's unload the dishwasher or fold the laundry or help clean the bathroom. I don't know what it is. It's probably, of course, it's different in every household. But how do you determine what is just regular here? This is part of just living here and what really the kids should earn money toward.
It's, again, a very personal decision. From my sort of thinking in our household, I think that it's important to have a sort of base level set of chores. So perhaps that's focusing on their personal space, their bedroom, keeping their room tidy, their bed made, their trash taken out. Perhaps it's helping with taking out the garbage, feeding a pet, emptying the dishwasher. That I think it's a good strategy, but again, personal decision here, to just have sort of a standard set of chores and expectations. And then perhaps the allowance is above and beyond that. For, you've gone beyond your sort of care, of your own space and just your minimum contributions. But now we're going to pay you for helping out with raking the lawn or vacuuming or helping with shoveling in the winter, added chores above and beyond. But again, very much a family decision and a personal decision based on the age of your child and based on the expectations that you've already set. But I do think it's a good strategy to have sort of the basic and then above and beyond paying them for. But some family...
And that's a good guideline, just that it's your space, whether your room, your bathroom, that kind of thing, and taking out the trash at the end of the day or whatever, because that is everybody's. But then those other things, the vacuuming, the mopping, the whatever it could be, would be something that would be earning money for them. So that's kind of a good, just sort of general baseline.
Another approach that some families will use is a goals-based approach. So rather than having an amount that they're earning specifically, you're still tying it to chores, but it's based on a savings goal. So perhaps the child says, I want a new video game console, and that console is $400 or $500. So rather than you paying the child for those chores and they get an actual allowance and a certain amount of money, you're putting that earning, if you will, towards that goal. So perhaps you say, I will contribute $200 to the item or whatever amount you agree upon when your next birthday, and you'll contribute the other half, or whatever that goal is. But you're putting the money towards the goal, not giving it directly to the child. So there's a couple different ways to do it. But I think having a minimum expectation of chores and then those allowance-based chores. The key is to set those expectations with the child, have a really clear plan of, again, what you're going to get paid for, when you're going to get paid, and how much, and really stick to that.
The consistency,
Yeah.
because, I know in my house, Saturdays get busy. Oh, I couldn't do whatever. And then suddenly it's 2 weeks later and it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Feels very personal.
Yeah. And just to add there, what works for me, because I think this is, as parents, the amount of time in the day and the chaos of our lives and all of the activities and everything we've got going on, and we're challenged and struggling with our own finances. How do we fit these money lessons in and these expectations in? And I think, again, using sort of that chart approach, even with an older child, it might be just a one sheet of paper that you can just check off, like, they did it or they didn't do it, or this Saturday they committed and they did the extra. And because if you're like me, you're going to get a week, 7 days down the road, and to really remember exactly what happened when and did they follow through, you're going to have to track it somehow to hold them accountable for what they've agreed to.
Let me drill down on that, because then, so say they do half their list and not the other half. Then do you say, okay, well, instead of $8 this week, you get $4?
Sure. So again, two approaches, and I think you're going to get tired of hearing me say no right or wrong, but think about in the workplace. If you only do half your job, what happens?
You get fired.
Right. So do you want to have expectations set where they can sort of meet their obligation or get halfway there and still get paid? Or do you not pay their allowance that week? Do you have a penalty, if you will? So that's, again, a decision you'll have to make up front. Do they have to complete all of their chores, or are there specific chores that they could complete some of and still get paid? Again, what type of lesson do you want them to learn? I think follow through and sort of modeling it like a real job is always a good approach. But again, that's got to be part of the plan and the guidance that you provide to the child up front.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
I'm actually taking personal notes here just so I remember when I go home today. Well, I did have a question about adjusting it over time, but I think we kind of hit on that. But just to reiterate, obviously, my 5-year-old is not going to get the same thing as an 11-year-old.
Sure.
So if you do stick with roughly that $1 to $2 per age, then there is a natural progression each year on what is earned. I would imagine, though, then the responsibilities also increase if your allowance is increasing.
Absolutely. As the child gets older, those expectations should certainly increase. The tasks that are, assigned, if you will, become more complex. There might be multiple steps to completing the task. For a young child, it might be bringing the laundry upstairs, but for an older child, it's doing the laundry. So it's again, the complexity and the length of time that it takes should certainly increase as they get older.
Even when you get the attitude that you're so unreasonable about what you're
Especially,
asking. Oh, especially. Got it.
especially when you get, especially
Again,
when you
taking
get that.
notes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This is something too that I think a lot of parents kind of struggle with. And this is a simple example, but say you're at the grocery store and this kind of falls under what should you spend your allowance on and not spend your allowance on. But like say you were just at the grocery store and somebody's like, "Oh, can I grab a pack of gum?" It's $1. Yeah, sure, throw it on. Should you stop and just say, "Well, did you bring your money?" Like, where is the balance within that?
Yeah. So I think that that's, again, another important part of all of this is to provide guidance to your child and have expectations set of what the allowance will, once they've earned it, be used for. So I think that another practice that a lot of parents will implement alongside the allowance is a conversation around setting aside, if you're earning $5 or $10 a week, setting aside money for spending, putting some money into savings, and then putting some money into giving. So a lot of families will have, saving, spending, giving jars, and really encourage the child to take their earnings and separate it out, set that expectation that's savings. And then that spend money, they should get into the habit of having a wallet or some way to carry that money to the store. And when they need a pack of gum or that small purchase, that's a great way to give them an opportunity to use their money and engage. And as I said earlier at the beginning, let them buy something that you are absolutely not necessarily going to buy for them. Let them make mistakes. Let them test out using their money and perhaps spending all of their money all at once on something that they might even regret later. That's okay. Having them make mistakes in a safe environment when their kids at home with you is much better than waiting until they're older and they have to learn all about finances through trial and error in adulthood. So I think if they're in a store, a couple of different things, and one gets away from just the allowance conversation. But I think it's important when you're in a store on a fairly regular basis to just say no. No, today, not today, maybe next time. Let's think about that purchase for next time. So I think that a great money lesson is to have the child learn that instant gratification isn't necessarily the best approach, and that waiting for that purchase or giving thought to that purchase and maybe buying it next time or saving up their allowance over time to make a bigger purchase at a different, another trip to the store. So say no. And then, yeah, sure, use your own money if you're going to buy a pack of gum. Because probably that gum is not $1,
Well, that's
right?
true.
So if they're earning $5, they're going to use up a good amount of their allowance money that week for that pack of gum, and they need to feel that and really realize that expense.
Yeah, I think that feeling it. And if they,
Yeah,
the next week, like, where was my $5? And it's like, remember you bought the pack of gum that you chewed in a day? That's where that
yeah.
$5 went. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I wonder how long though kids should get an allowance. Like once they've started working a job, do we still stick with allowance because it is home based activities, or is there sort of a sweet spot with the age where it's like, okay, enough with the allowance, you can go make your money outside of the house?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents let go of the allowance once the child is working part-time when they're a teenager. And perhaps instead then if they continue to use that goals-based approach that we talked about. Things get more expensive, as as our kids get older. The things that they want, whether it's iPhones or video games or sports equipment, music equipment, things get more expensive. And so perhaps you take a goals based approach where they're needing to make a big purchase, they're earning money outside of the home, but then contributing at home And part of that payment for that contribution, you're putting money into, whatever their financial goal is. So that might be a great approach to migrate from actually paying them a direct allowance and instead contributing towards their financial goal.
And speaking of the items getting more expensive, how do you deal with requests for more money for their allowance? It's inevitably going to happen. So, what advice do you have for dealing with those? I just need a little more, or hey, I'm not getting paid enough. That, mopping the floors just isn't for me. This is hard labor. So, how do we deal with those requests? Or demands. I say requests, but sometimes it's
Sure.
delivered more in a demanding kind of way.
Yeah, I think that, of course, as we talked about, using that rule of thumb, $1 to $2 for every age. So as they get older, that's going to increase. If they're asking for more money, you should require that they take on additional chores. That again, your expectations will increase. But if we're trying to teach financial lessons, just handing them that additional money because they've demanded it is absolutely a big don't. As we look at do's and don'ts, that is absolutely a don't. So if they're wanting to make a big purchase or they want to earn more money, just like in the real world, you have to do something in exchange for that. So if they want more, they're going to have to contribute more and participate more in, the day-to-day chores and the workings of the household.
Mary, I'm obsessed. I love everything about what you just said. I don't know that my kids will love it quite as much, but that's why we're here. If you
That's
had
right.
one piece of advice, I mean, this is just such a great I'm so glad we're having this conversation. But if there was one takeaway for parents listening today, what would that be?
Oh boy, there's so many things. I think really to go back to just emphasizing that there are no right or wrong answers here. What's important is just to get started, to start having those money conversations and use the allowance as an approach for teaching kids about money, to just get started no matter where you are, to know that you don't have to be an expert, that you don't have to have everything perfect when it comes to your own finances. And we're all in the same boat, right? Even though this is what we do here at Fame and what I do for a living, it's not perfect in my household either. So just know, every little bit is going to make a difference. Never too early or late to get started, and just do the best you can. You're busy, it's stressful, there's a lot of demands, but every little bit is going to be helpful along the way.
And you know what comes to mind when you're saying that too is that if that $1 to $2 per year feels overwhelming, especially if you have multiple kids. I have three. I'm going to tell you, my 16-year-old is not going to get $32 a week. There's just no way.
Right.
But I think the takeaway too is that we can make these adjustments. That really is just meant is a guide.
Yeah.
So whatever feels right in your family, wherever you are on the financial spectrum, today versus tomorrow versus next year, it all changes. Just that you're doing something that works for your family.
Perfect advice. No right or wrong here. Every little bit makes a difference. The $1 to $2 per for the child's age, that is simply a rule of thumb. And these are all very personal decisions that you'll make for your family as a parent in your own household. Like I said, every little bit helps, and all of these interactions are going to be helpful. So I know sometimes it feels like you're not making a dent in teaching them everything that they need to know, but being on the other end of the spectrum, as I said, my kids are 19 and 24, and my 24-year-old in particular, all those little nuggets along the way, even though I can tell you I didn't do everything at the exact perfect time, and we didn't have all of the conversations I hoped that we had, but he certainly picked up a lot along the way, and it did make a difference. So
yeah, they are
you're
learning and
doing a
growing.
great job. Just keep at it.
Even when they act like they're not listening, I think that they're absorbing.
Yes, undoubtedly.
Mary, thank you so much. I do want to let our listeners know we will have more resources on this very topic on our website. That is wgme.com/raisingme. Mary, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great. I appreciate the time.
So much good information in this episode. I got to tell you, I love that idea of the sliding scale based on age. You just, have to find the right scale for you. Is it that $1 or $2 per year? Maybe. Maybe it's a quarter or 50 cents. It doesn't really matter, but it helps to take the guesswork out of all of it. And potentially eliminate some of those conversations of, why is older sister or brother getting more than me? A lot of it is about teaching delayed gratification and the true value of money. And I'll just admit it, I can be a sucker at the store. But after the conversation with Mary, I'm much more inclined to say, well, did you bring your money? Or if not today or you don't have enough, let's think about ways that you can earn more. It's hard. I totally get that too. I'm usually, not always, but usually, pretty quick to throw in an extra $5 or whatever if one of the kids is short. Ultimately, and this is stripping away everything else, the lesson behind all of it is that hard work pays off. Yeah, you might rather be playing video games or hanging out with your friends. Totally get that. But you first have a responsibility and you're rewarded for sticking to it. Bottom line here, Mary says it best. It is never too early. It is never too late to start. It is just important to get started and to stick with it. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, and we are going much deeper into the money mindset on the simple ways to teach your kids about money, even when you're still trying to figure it all out for yourself. That is the next episode coming out. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please take a moment to follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcast. Of course, consider a positive rating and review as well. It helps others find this message, and we really appreciate it. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.